What's up everyone, welcome back to another episode of Thumbnail Thursday where I will be recreating a thumbnail from one of our favorite creators. Today I want to talk about Andrew Schulz and particularly his Flagrant podcast. Today I want to reconstruct his latest video, which is him reacting to Andrew Tate getting arrested and the tweet by Greta Thunberg, which was hilarious. So what I've been noticing with Flagrant in the past year or so that I've been following them is that their thumbnail psychology has really evolved, and it's important to note because if you are creating a thumbnail for a podcast or you have a podcast of yourself, there's a lot that we can learn from Andrew Schulz and his whole creative team. So if we go down a little bit, you'll notice that his thumbnails weren't really this way 2.5 years ago. I think it was somewhere around early 2021 when he started bringing the Flagrant 2 text into his thumbnail. But even then, a lot of it was very generic podcast type thumbnails. It's just a frame from the episode itself, and there's like a box with a colored outline with something that's relevant to the text. And although that's good, and a lot of people still do that on podcasts, I think the way that he has upped his game has really reflected in his views as well. So if we just quickly look at Social Blade, channel really picked up Jan of last year. And if you look at kind of the middle of 2020 was where he started getting consistent views, right? And Jan of last year, he really popped off. And if we look at his page itself, first half of 2020 was around the time when he changed his thumbnail design. He did an episode with Fresh and Fit. If you notice the views, he's been getting 300, 500, 700k, 400k. This one got 1.8 million. And then 3 episodes later, he got 1.8 million again, and then 1.2 million. So I think this was around, these 5 podcasts was around the time when he really took off. Now, I mentioned a little bit about 3 emotional triggers that thumbnails should have in the first episode, which I will link right there. But what I want to talk about right now is elaborate on that theory a little bit. This 3 emotional triggers is something that I heard Hayden Hillier-Smith talk about. So Hayden Hillier-Smith, if you guys don't know, is or was the main editor for Logan Paul for almost 7-8 years. He's a brilliant editor. He also has a podcast called The Editing Podcast. He talks about this theory of 3 emotional triggers, right? So each thumbnail need to have 3 points that trigger you. Here, if you look, the first emotional trigger is Andrew's face himself. The second emotional trigger is the faces of Andrew Tate and Greta Thunberg. Why I'm combining the two is because by themselves, Andrew Tate or Greta Thunberg don't really make sense. But when you put them together and in the context of, oh, something happened, and it makes sense to put both of them together. And the third emotional trigger, which actually makes you curious, is this text arrested. Now what I want to do is actually start creating the thumbnail. First layer is what's most important, right? Which is Andrew's face. The second layer is the people that he's talking about, which is Andrew Tate, Greta Thunberg. And also, since it's related, he has put a snippet of the tweet that Greta had posted. So first we'll take Andrew's face. So what I've done here, I've taken 3 artboards. Getting artboards is also fairly simple. Layer, new, and artboard. Artboard is essentially your canvas or your frame. You can have multiple artboards. It just helps jumping between 2 things, and you can export them individually. So you can have multiple things on the same page. But cool. So these are 3 artboards. I have the original, which is the original thumbnail. I have the recreation, which is what we'll be making. And I have all the material that I need to make the recreation. Now, thumbnails are all about emotion, right? So you'll notice that Andrew's facial expressions in each of the thumbnails are different. He tries to relate it to the title and the topic, right? So is Kanye done? You have Akash wincing his face. Liver King speaks on steroids. Andrew is, shocked. There is always some sort of emotional trigger that you get just by watching Andrew's face. By itself, it may not seem like a big thing, but when you pair that with the title, it really goes well and subconsciously gets you to click on the video. What I'm going to do is start off with Andrew. I'm going to make it bigger. Now we kind of have a comparison between this picture and this picture. Now what we need to do is select only the subject. I mentioned this in the first episode, but this is a great shortcut that I found to select only the picture. You go to select and you do subject. And what it does is it selects the entire subject from the background. Now what I usually do is copy this selection onto a new layer and deleting the original layer. So to do that, you need a selection tool. So you can select any of these, either rectangular marquee or polygon lasso or quick selection. I usually just do quick selection. And once you have the selection tool, you do right click, and layer via copy. And I'm going to delete the original layer. We are going to center him a little bit. So now he's in the center. I have one image of Greta here, but now I'm realizing that her head is cut off. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to Safari and I'm going to try to get another picture of Greta where we have her head. Now you can't just pick any picture because again, facial impressions matter a lot. Now Greta has obviously made fun of Andrew Tate and that needs to be reflected in the facial expression of Greta that we're putting in the thumbnail. Yeah, this was great, but the head is cut off. Something like, I just got another picture of Greta that we can use. So now what we need to do is place it properly. I also want to flip it because if you notice, Andrew is facing the right, so I want Greta to face the left. Let's first select only the subject and we'll copy this onto a new layer, delete the old layer, and I am going to flip it. Now we need to place this behind Andrew and also make this bigger. So we have Andrew, we have Greta. Now we need Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, get him here, make him bigger and select subject. Now what we need to do is change the exposure of all the three images and just make them more even. So here I'll go to image, adjustments and exposure. I want to increase the offset direction. Same thing with Greta Thunberg. Reduce this. We might even have to change the brightness and contrast. Not the best, it's still very red. So I want to change the color balance. Yes, bring it towards blue. So face much better. We are going to do the same for Andrew Schulz. So his face just looks a lot more whiter. Same thing here. Now we shall work on the final background. So I'll bring, this is the Twitter one that I found. I am going to expand this so it fills the entire frame, and I'm also going to bring this to the absolute back. Now you'll notice in the original, it's not as clear, right? They've blurred it out for a reason, so it's more subconscious. So for this, we'll go to filter, we'll go to blur and Gaussian blur. Right there, if you see, I think 9.5 is perfect. I think we can make Andrew a little bit bigger. There are a few things that we need to add. They have added a little bit of shadow to the right of each of the faces. This is just to give it that depth of field. For this, you just need to select this and click on right click and blending options. We need a drop shadow. Now when I go to drop shadow, I will angle it. Yeah, so if you notice here, we want it only to the right. So we'll angle it like this. We will mess around with the spread a little bit, the opacity a little bit, and I'm going to say okay. So I'm going to go to Greta, blending options, make a drop shadow. The settings were already saved. Now I just need to click on OK. Same thing with Andrew Tate. Now I think we're getting somewhere. I think the image itself came with a lot of shadows, so we can't do anything about that, but the remaining look good. We are going to make Greta a little bit bigger, so you can select that layer to Control or Command T. Now we need this text. All right, we will make this bigger. Actually, I don't think it is Bebas New. Now what we need is, I will click again blending options, and if you'll notice, this also has a drop shadow. Okay, we are going to untick global light. The shadow is being created by this light, by this virtual light, and if you use global light, then it'll be the exact same shadow across your file. But if we don't use global light, then we can just change this to a different thing, which is what we want to do. I will change the spread and reduce the distance and increase it. It's actually all around the text, which is what you'll see here. We also need noise in this, right? We need noise, and I'm going to reduce the opacity, reduce the spread a little bit. Perfect. Look at that. All right, I think what they also did was bring the pizza box up. Now what I want to do is only select the box. So I'm going to select the lasso tool, which is L. I'm going to outline the box quickly, layer via copy. Perfect. And bring it into our recreation artboard. Now I want to make this bigger and push this behind Andrew Schulz. We are going to bring it here. This looks perfect. Now we're just going to push this back on top of Andrew Tate, and I want to lower the opacity. All right. Now the only thing that was missing was the tweet, which I have brought in here. And this needs to be between Andrew Schulz and Greta Thunberg. So we are also going to crop this. So I'm just going to select L, select only this part there via copy, delete this. Wonderful. That is it. Final touches would just be to make this a little bit darker. So we are just going to go to adjustments. Perfect. I think of course the font is a little bit different. Maybe next time I'll try to figure out what the exact font is. But I think for a recreation, this was great. I am not a Photoshop expert by any means, if you figured out in this tutorial. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful to you to understand how the YouTube channel Flagrant and Andrew Schulz makes their thumbnails. This was a new series that we're doing where I recreate thumbnails of our favorite creators in under 20 minutes and show you how to make them from scratch. Subscribe to the 1000 Faces YouTube channel to not miss out, and I shall see you next Thursday. Peace.